Hey everyone, welcome back to Prospect Avenue. Kris Baker here in the bunker. The dog days of summer are here. For hockey fans, mid-July, pretty much the deadest spot on the hockey calendar that you can think of before we start seeing some World Junior development camps start to pop up here in the next couple of weeks. But wanted to get together real quick for just a real brief podcast. Not going to drone on forever tonight. Wanted to attend to a couple of housekeeping details and briefly discuss those items, as well as do a little fun exercise regarding the Prospects Challenge. So you may have seen this week that the Sabres announced that they'll be hosting the Prospects Challenge again down at Lecom Harbor Center September 15th through the 18th. Sabres will be joined by Boston, Montreal, New Jersey, Ottawa, and Pittsburgh. The Sabres will open up their Prospects Challenge action on that Friday evening, the 15th at 7 p.m. against Montreal. Montreal could pose a pretty interesting test for a very talented group of Sabres prospects that we expect to be in attendance. Philip Meshar, who played with Kitchener last year, was a first rounder in 2022. We should see Riley Kidney, Josh Waugh. They have a pretty good group of forwards. Owen Beck, who I really like, just a hard driving two-way forward, gets to the net, has a little bit of a power game to him, really complete player that we've watched the past couple of years with the Steelheads up in the Ontario League. And then he finished out last year with Peterborough, as well as David Reinbacher. I think that all signs are pointing to David Reinbacher playing his season in Switzerland this year, but is expected to come over for rookie camp and, maybe take a few laps when the big boys come for main camp before going back and finishing his season out in Europe before likely coming over in 2024. So the Sabres will open up against the Habs on Friday. They'll follow up on Saturday against Jersey, another 7 p.m. start down at Harbor Center. Jersey has brought some pretty decent squads here in the past. We've seen folks like Pavel Zacha. We saw Dawson Mercer. We saw Jack Hughes here the year that he was drafted. Maybe this year we'll see Luke Hughes. Luke Hughes doesn't have this extensive NHL resume. I see no reason why he won't be in attendance in Buffalo with the Devil squad when they arrive here in mid-September. Sabres will take Sunday off and then close things out on Monday, the 18th against Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's been kind of hot and cold with their prospect groups the past few years. This is a team that's been moving out a lot of draft picks at the deadline as they've loaded up for playoff runs. So we've seen a lot of later round picks, mid to late round picks, a lot of invites, a lot of training camp invites and things of that nature, undrafted free agents from them. They've gotten a little bit better. They've gone to the WHL the past 2 years, 2022, taking a big rangy defenseman, Owen Pickering. And then this year they followed up with another Western League product, very smart, crafty playmaking and scorer, really a well-rounded offensive player in Braden Yeager. So we should see both of those players here when the Penguins hit town. So with that said, one player that maybe we weren't expecting to be in Buffalo, but will be here, it looks like, is, we had some breaking news this week in the prospect ranks that Norwin Panocha will be coming and playing in North America this year. The breaking news hit yesterday when Yannick Jean, the coach and GM of Chicoutimi in the QMJHL, did announce that Panocha, who they took earlier in July in the CHL import draft, is going to be joining Chicoutimi this year. So he should be coming over to North America, probably like mid, the August 19th, August 20th range. And then should be expected, of course, to play in camp with the Sabres at the Prospects Challenge. Panocha was kind of interesting because he was drafted in the seventh round, excuse me. And, this was a player, if you were down at development camp, good size, moves very well, long reach, got a very projectable NHL body and a frame that you kind of see should fill out nicely. Could be a decent late round find. If he had played with Berlin in the top German league, as was expected at the time of him being drafted by Buffalo, probably be a 5'6" guy. Minutes would be decent, but maybe not as great as they could be if he were to come over and play in juniors. And that's exactly what it looks like he's going to do. So that's a big win. I'm pretty sure the Sabres are delighted with Panocha coming over to North America this year. Get more familiar with the North American rinks, get familiar with just kind of the style of play over here. So there's going to be a drop off in speed and talent because he's not going to be playing against grown men in the top German league. But I think there's a nice trade-off with him just coming over in the system. And it just creates better connectivity just from sheer geography, better connectivity with the Sabres player development staff, with him being a hell of a lot closer to Buffalo, with him being up in Quebec. So nice little development there. And Panocha is a world junior hopeful. He's on the radar firmly. I mean, not just as an NHL draft pick, but I mean, this was a player that looked really good for Germany at their under 18 events that they played this year. And, he's on a roster right now. So Germany is actually going to be playing some games next weekend against Slovakia. So they have a world junior, kind of an under 20 camp, a national camp in Fussen, Germany. The Slovaks are going to come. They're going to play 2 games on Thursday and Friday, the 27th and 28th of July. And so that could be a nice little meeting of the minds there with Panocha from Germany, and Maxim Sturbach should be there with the Slovaks before he kind of packs his gear up and heads over to Michigan State for the fall semester. So fun little development there with Panocha that I wanted to make sure we covered tonight. Along the lines of world junior hopefuls that I wanted to make sure we covered tonight is on the topic of Topias Leinonen. So Leinonen was named to Finland's roster. This was weeks ago, earlier in the summer, might even probably late spring, when Finland announced what their under 20 summer camp roster was going to look like. Leinonen was one of 2 goalies on that roster. Now, Finland just this week arrived in Välimäki, Finland for their pre-camp before they put their team together that they're going to bring over to Plymouth, Michigan for USA Hockey's World Junior Summer Showcase. That's at the end of July, and it kind of spills over into the beginning of August. The roster, I got to look at it today, and I'm not seeing Leinonen on there, which implies that the stress fracture in his heel may have not yet fully healed, and likely it may imply that we're not going to see him in Plymouth. That's not 100% certain yet because Finland technically hasn't named their formal roster for the World Junior Summer Showcase. So Finland's going to be practicing the next few days. On Sunday and Monday, they're going to have Switzerland and Czechia in for games in Välimäki. At that point, then they will announce their team and head over to Plymouth, Michigan, but not the greatest sign that we're not going to see Leinonen there. Like I said, it may imply that we may not see him until JYP Uvescula breaks for Liga camp later on in the summer. So some housekeeping details there. But the World Junior Summer Showcase, even if Leinonen is not involved for Finland, should still feature 2 prominent Sabres prospects in the forward ranks. Anton Wahlberg and Noah Ostlund for Sweden are expected to attend and could be in the lineup when Sweden takes on USA Blue on Saturday, July 29th at 1 p.m. Eastern time as the action kicks off there. So with that said, wanted to just move right in. Again, I don't want to be spending a ton of time here tonight. It's summer. The weather's nice, even though it's kind of raining out right now. Here, Aspen is making her podcast debut. She's not going for a WALK. She probably wants to right now, but for those watching on YouTube, you got your first glimpse of my co-host Aspen on the podcast. So welcome to the show, Aspen. Welcome to the show. Okay, beat it. I'll talk to you in a little bit. I got to finish up here. So want to talk about the Prospects Challenge, and a fun little exercise that I wanted to put together tonight to get us through the dog days was, let's do some roster projections. Let's forecast what the Sabres line combinations could look like when they open up against the Habs on that Friday night. Also talk about who's not going to be there, because we get a lot of just questions every year. I know many of you know this, but for those that don't, you'll see players in development camp that won't be in training camp in the fall, and they won't be at rookie camp. And that's primarily because if players are members of European clubs and they're not expected to take a run at a North American job for the season, or they're NCAA players or collegiate athletes, student athletes, right? They are in school and not expected to participate in training camp. And there's a lot of players that fall into those categories for the Sabres this year. It's a very rare event that the Sabres will bring a European player over that's not expected to be, in the AHL or the NHL for that matter in the season. I think the last one that they brought over was in 2019. Lucas Rusek came over, came to rookie camp, played in the Prospects Challenge on a line with fellow countryman Matej Pekar, and then shortly thereafter may have gotten a few more practices in and bounced back over and played his Czech Extraliga season with Sparta Prague. Not sure of the reasons that they brought him over. Maybe they thought, they'd get him under contract and get him into Rochester, but needless to say, there's really only two guys I can think of, and I have them with asterisks on my list here. But Noah Ostlund, who's going to be playing a pretty big role with Växjö this year in the SHL, and from the 2023 class, Anton Wahlberg, who we saw play come up really big for Malmö as they avoided relegation last year in the SHL. Those are two guys that maybe the Sabres could think about bringing over, but really they're not expecting them to take a run at a roster spot in the AHL or certainly the NHL this year. So for me, it doesn't make sense to consider bringing them over. I could see it if they wanted to, but one thing to consider is that rookie camp will, come a few days before the Prospect Challenge games will begin. And the SHL season begins on September 13th this year. It's a Wednesday. So another cool little tidbit, by the way, is that Saturday when the Sabres will open against Montreal, that morning for us here in the United States, Eastern time, Malmö and Wahlberg will be facing off against Växjö and Ostlund. So we can see those two prospects go head to head. But for those watching on YouTube, I put together a little visual talk track to keep us aligned on who won't be here. If you're listening audio only in your car or at the gym or walking your DOGSs like Aspen here, I'll try to capture the spirit of the thing and just quickly go through the names. So we already mentioned Noah Ostlund and Anton Wahlberg. They'll be joined from the SHL ranks by Joel Ratkovich-Berntsen, who just recently re-upped with Frölunda, William von Barnekow, who is Wahlberg's teammate in Malmö, and it was actually an injury to von Barnekow that created the opportunity that Wahlberg just latched onto last year and really just dove right in and played a pretty big role with the Red Hawks in the SHL. And Linus Sjödin is the final SHL player from Rogla that is not expected to be in attendance at rookie camp and certainly shouldn't be on any line for the Prospects Challenge. What's interesting to note about this list of players, by the way, is that the Sabres have 18 guys on this list, 4 defensemen, 13 forwards, and a goaltender. They could practically ice a second team of prospects that are not, they won't be in attendance. But I mean, the Sabres, I guess the moral of the story here is that the Sabres just have strength in numbers with prospects. They're not short on talent by any means, but they are loaded with just sheer numbers by virtue of having so many draft picks over the past few years. So to round out the list, and we'll cruise through these very quickly because I think you're more interested in who's actually going to be here in the fall. But in Sweden's second division, Hockey Allsvenskan, Gustav Karlsson will not be in attendance. He has a tryout this year with Nybro, who's moving up to Hockey Allsvenskan. Karlsson's a product of the Örebro system, and he could eventually maybe bounce back there if his game escalates. But right now, I think his eyes are set on getting through that tryout with Nybro and staying there for the entire year. And on defense, Albert Lacassin, an offensively wired, decent skating defenseman, played last year in the second division with AIK. He's going to be moving back to Karlskoga this year. Joining the Europeans that are not going to be in attendance in camp are 2 members of Finland's top league in Liga. So we talked about Topias Leinonen, the goaltender from Jyväskylä. He is not going to be in camp unless they somehow want to bring him over, since they didn't get a look at him this summer, but I'm not really seeing the point of that. He's not under contract. He's not expected to win a job in Rochester. They certainly don't want to put him in the Coast League. He's under contract in JYP, and all expectations, like 99.999%, is that's where he's going to be. And TPS Turku forward Viljami Marjala looked really good at development camp, looked really good last year, a dominating figure in the under 20 league in Finland, and worked his way up and, played basically a second line role. And that's probably where he slots in again this year in Finland's top league, Marjala, an interesting player to watch this year. One of those storylines, like I mentioned the last time we got together here, is he's set to have a pretty big season. So not expecting to see him here in the Prospects Challenge, but certainly one that we're going to be watching as his season lifts off later this summer and into the fall. Also on this list, Jakub Konechny from Sparta Prague in the Czech Extra League. Not expecting him to be in camp. And then quickly we'll go through and just finish this off with Prokhor Poltapov, a prospect I really like. He carved out a nice role with Sergei Fedorov's CSKA club as they marched their way to the KHL championship last season. Poltapov got, quality minutes. He started the year on a top line, and then his kind of ice time dipped. And then when the playoffs started to heat up, Poltapov was out there getting bigger minutes. They were putting him out there in clutch situations. Played a part in winning that championship. He's got 2 years left on his KHL contract, and we will not see him in Buffalo until that contract is up. And then finally, the 6 NCAA players that the Sabres have drafted in recent years will not be in rookie camp this year. That's Maxim Sturbach from Michigan State, Gavin McCarthy going to BU, Steven Sardarian from UNH. Aaron Huglin is an interesting one. I've kind of toyed around with the idea of maybe the Sabres looking at bringing him into Rochester. But all expectations right now are that he's going to be going back and getting another season of Big Ten action in with the Minnesota Golden Gophers. Rounding out the NCAA list, Jake Richard, who coming out of the USHL is going to be a freshman at UConn this year, and Matteo Costantini, formerly of the University of North Dakota. He hit the transfer portal this year and is enrolled at Western Michigan. He will be a Bronco this fall and will not be in Buffalo for rookie camp. Last but certainly not least, Sean Cohane from the 2023 draft class, a defenseman that's going to play a gap year this upcoming season with Tri-City of the USHL before enrolling in Harvard. Pretty bright kid. All signs are pointing to that being the case. So finally, we will dive into the lines that I would put together if I was putting the roster together. It's not going to include all players that are going to be in camp. Obviously, Sabres haven't announced the roster yet. There will be some new names and new invites that weren't at development camp. That always happens. There could be a few surprises of players that are in the system that show up and play, but we're going to go with guys that we're pretty confident are going to be there. We're going to put some line combinations together. If Kris Baker was putting the roster together and running the bench, heaven forbid that would ever happen. Right. But let's just kind of get into it. And again, for those watching on YouTube, it would have been nice if I could have done these lines one by one. I'm not afforded that technology with the slide sharing that I'm doing here. So you're going to see them all at once, but we're certainly going to go through them one by one. And starting at the top, a no-brainer for me, pairing Matthew Savoie with his Winnipeg Ice, former Winnipeg Ice. They're now the Wenatchee Wild of the Western Hockey League. But Matthew Savoie with his Winnipeg teammate, Zach Benson. This is a duo that combined in the regular season and playoffs last year. I think they posted about 240 points together combined. And I think the fans would like to see it. I think it would be a fun pairing. There's certainly familiarity and comfortability with them playing together. And I paired them on with Isak Rosén playing his off wing. I thought it made sense to put that speed element with Savoie. I think it makes sense to put Rosén in that position on his off wing. I just like him having that year of North American experience, put him with two younger guys that really haven't seen that level. Certainly Benson has it, and Savoie just got a sniff. Having that tempo, that offensive creativity, I could just see a lot of really fun things happening. A trigger man with Rosén with that acceleration. Benson just does a little bit of everything, and that firecracker down the middle with Savoie and that speed element, everything he does is fast. That could be a very fun line to watch. And that's what I'm going to roll with here on my projected forward line at the top. The second line on this list, you can make an argument that they should have been first on this list. If you want to have that argument, I'm certainly here for it. Leave it in the comments, by the way. I want to see your line combinations that you want to see in the comments. I think that would be a fun little conversation that we could have to kind of get us through some of these dog days of July. But line two for me, Yuri Kulik down the middle, flanked by Neuchev and Kizakov. Now, I like Viktor Neuchev here and Kizakov together just from the language element, the Russian familiarity. I think it makes a lot of sense. Kizakov was really interesting at development camp. After the 3-on-3 scrimmage, he wanted to get his picture taken with Neuchev. He was just really excited to have some Russian brethren there with him, some comrades. And putting them on a line together with Kulich, to me, I think makes a lot of sense. Kizikov, I toyed with the idea of putting him up in the Rosane spot with Savoy and Benson, just to kind of put him with some higher profile players, because really the mission here for me with Kizikov in this rookie tournament is to get him going, get him scoring some goals, get him some confidence. He's going to be expected to play a very big role with Seth Appert's Amerks squad this year, and whatever it takes to get him going. But look, if you put him with Kulich and Neuychev, and it helps Neuychev communicate with someone that can understand him, I think it's winning all the way around. You're checking all the boxes. Kulich, look, his game down the middle last year really blossomed. When Brandon Byro went down, they put Kulich down the middle after the World Juniors. That's when Kulich's goal scoring started really clicking. I mean, he just finished at an incredible clip. And you want to keep developing Kulich's full 200-foot game. His defensive zone responsibilities improved as the season went on last year. They're not perfect. There's still work to do. Keeping him down the middle, keeping him supporting his defenseman in the defensive zone, and, breaking out with the forwards, winning battles in the middle of the ice, improving his neutral zone play. There's a lot of reasons why you want to keep Kulich down the middle there, regardless of how he projects or where he projects to play in the NHL. In the prospect tournament, I'm putting him down the middle, and those are the wingers that I'm putting him with. The third line on this slide for those watching on YouTube, and I'm about to announce for those listening in audio, is a line that I can see actually being put together by Seth Appert this season in Rochester. And that's with Tyson Kozak down the middle, with Philip Cederquist on his left side, and Olivier Nadeau on the right side. This is a line that could be hard to play against. Kozak sets a really good defensive tempo. He's very good off the puck. He likes to win battles to get the puck back. He's just very responsible in all three zones of the ice. Cederquist and Nadeau, two guys that are very good on the boards that can win battles. They're heavy beneath the goal line. They both like to get to the front of the net. I could see this being a unit that you put together. They're a young unit, but it's hard to avoid at the AHL level. Cederquist and Kozak already have a year of experience, and Nadeau could just blend right in with those guys. And I think that makes a lot of sense to put them together here at the Prospects Challenge as well, if you think it's going to be a line that you can see coming to fruition when the AHL season begins. Lastly, rounding out the forwards with Riley Fiedler-Schultz, Lawson Shirk, and Ethan Miedema. Miedema, the recent draft pick from the Sabres out of Kingston in the OHL. He's going to go back. You can move him up and down as the tournament progresses. You're not going to stick with lines maybe through all three games, but this is the spot where I put him with Shirk and Fiedler-Schultz. One thing here, so Fiedler-Schultz, by the way, played with the Calgary Hitmen last year. For those that don't know, recently inked a AHL two-way contract with the Amerks. Shirk is not signed. He was a development camp invite this year, came from the Hamilton Bulldogs. He could go back and be an overager next year, but the thought is that, he's a kind of a two-way centerman, face-off guy, really good in the neutral zone. Didn't always have that speed burst, but I think that actually at development camp that we saw some improved skating and a little bit more acceleration, some really good 2-3 steps from him that were at least better than what I was used to seeing from him. Maybe they bring him back for a look here in training camp, and they throw him out there for the Prospects Challenge. Moving to the D, this is a little more simpler for me, very, very straight line. And we're just going to start at the top of the pairing and Nikita Novikov and Ryan Johnson. I always like pairing a big physical guy with one that's a little more mobile. The irony here is that the bigger physical guy, Novikov, is the guy that I see more apt to attacking the play offensively when he gets the puck. It's not that Johnson doesn't do it. He can get it and go, but he's so focused on using his mobility and his agility in the defensive zone. And he's been defending more with his body. He's always been very good with his stick. But this is a pair that I just like to see. Both guys can go. Novikov will go more. Johnson's just more selective when he does it, but I think they're both extremely strong defensively, and they would do very well with any of those four forward units that I previously mentioned. The second pair that I put together are 2022 draft mates, Mats Lindgren out of Red Deer and Vsevolod Komarov, who just recently won the Memorial Cup with Patrick Roy's Quebec Remparts. Lindgren, it's kind of the same type of approach here. Lindgren relies on his mobility, his agility. He is more of a puck transporter. Komarov can do a little bit of everything, but he's got some of those Nikita Novikov vibes where he likes to be physical. He'll sacrifice the body to block shots. He likes to get down on a knee and use his big body to shut down passing and shooting lanes. I could see that pair being one that you put together and just kind of roll with it there. Could you mix and match, Novikov with Komarov, Lindgren with Johnson? You can flip-flop any of these guys, but I just like how I have them laid out there, and that's what I elected to go with. We're going to round it out with Norwin Panocha, who we mentioned will be in Chicoutimi this year. We're going to put him with Nico Savoie, who recently signed an AHL deal with the Rochester Americans. I'm expecting him to be in camp, obviously, with that deal being signed. Very good defensive defenseman, but Patrick Waugh had all of his guys involved in the play in the offensive zone. Savoie certainly fits that profile of a defender, and I just elected to put him here with Panocha. Now, I did include on this roster Chris Jandrick and Zach Metza. They're on their first contract. These are guys that maybe you throw out there for one game each, maybe 2 games. I'm certainly not putting them in kind of that core defensive pairs right now for me, but I wanted to mention that they could be guys that we see, at least one of them in one of the games. Let's put it that way. In net, this is where it gets interesting for me. Scott Retzlaff, you're definitely going to see him here. He's a World Junior hopeful for Canada this year. I really think, probably the 2025 World Junior is more realistic for him, but he's certainly on the radar for Hockey Canada, taking part in the Zoom meetings, potentially gets an invite when they break for camp in December. But Retzlaff is a no-brainer. He's a lock to be in the Prospects Challenge. I don't know if Devin Levi is going to get thrown out there. I'm sure Levi wants to play. I'm sure he's going to want to see some pucks before the big boys come for main camp. Maybe the Sabres could throw him a game. I don't know. I put Josh Fleming on here, who was a development camp invite, played last season with Bathurst in the Q, because maybe you throw Fleming that Monday game and give Retzlaff 2 games. I'm just not sure I'm putting Levi out there. Again, I think fans certainly want to see it. I'm inclined to believe that Levi would like to play a game. So I put him in the mix here. I'm wishy-washy. I'm not sure if it's the thing that they're going to do. So I just wanted to kind of have that conversation and suss that out. I'm definitely in on Retzlaff, getting, maybe 2 starts if Levi doesn't, throw Fleming a game as an invite. So we will round this out, by the way. You can't do a roster projection without having some fun with PK and PP lines. So we're going to close it out with that. And this first power play unit that I put together is absolutely loaded with Benson, Savoie, and Roseanne up front. And I put Lindgren and Kulik on the point. You're probably saying, what's up with Lindgren? Well, Lindgren's a very good puck transporter. He'll carry it through 3 lines. Very good on the breakout. He establishes the power play setup once he gets into the offensive zone. He walks the line really well. Again, just uses his skating to make plays all over the ice, and it's an asset on the power play. And they used him in the bumper spot this year in Red Deer. He knows how to work a power play. He runs it at the top of the box, but he creeps into the slot. He was really good in the bumper. And when he's in that bumper, he moves right down the center lane to the front of the net a lot of times, and he's right there on the spot. That's how he scored. He didn't score a ton of goals this year, but a lot of the goals that he scored were by doing just that on the power play. And then, of course, Kulik with the bomb. He can rotate down when Roseanne rotates down, and Kulik can use that one-timer from the flank. But I like Kulik and Roseanne being on the same side. And let's just give Benson some room to breathe on the other side. So that's a really fun looking power play 1. And the second power play was just as fun to put together. And I'll give you the rationale with this, because there's 4 Russians on my second power play unit with Kizakov and Noichev on the wings, Komarov and Novikov. Yes, 2 defensemen up top. Went a little more old school with that. I wanted to get the 4 Russians out there. I just think it would be a fun look with Nadeau at center. Nadeau is a winger. He scores a lot of goals at the front of the net, but you may not be aware that in the regular season and playoffs this year, and keep in mind, he didn't show up until, just after Christmas. Okay. He missed the first half of the year recovering from shoulder surgery, but in the regular season and the playoffs, Nadeau took like almost 300 faceoffs this year. It was like 292 draws or something like that. I wrote it down somewhere. So he can take draws and get to the net. And I like that power play unit. And you got to put Nadeau out there because he just cleans up around the net all day long. There's plenty of creativity out there with Noichev, Kizakov, and I just think it'd be fun to throw those 4 Russians out there and let them have fun. Let them take some first power play minutes at different times and just mix it up a little bit. On the PK, Tyson Kozak with Isak Rosén as my first unit. I love the idea of using Rosén's speed, just like I mentioned it with Savoy and Benson. I like it here on the PK. I like it as you start to develop more of Rosén's complete game. You see that he started to fill out last year. You've seen him be sneaky good with his stick defensively. His stick positioning is one of the most underrated parts of his game when he doesn't have the puck. I think he'd be a tremendous penalty killer. And frankly, I think it's a role that you're going to want to see him work his way into when he ascends up to the NHL ranks. I could see him being a guy that the Sabres rely on to kill penalties out there. Do it here. Start the work now and start building that part of his resume. And he can play that role this year in Rochester as well. And I think I could see him doing it with Kozak. So I put Kozak and Rosén on PK1 with Novikov and Johnson, that pair on the back end. My PK2 puts Shirk with Nadeau. Nadeau's a battler. He's another guy that sacrifices to make defensive plays. There's a lot of guys that you can put there, but I just think putting Shirk with Nadeau with Nico Savoy and his Quebec Remparts teammate, Vsevolod Komarov on the back end makes a lot of sense to me. I'm already at the 32-minute mark. I didn't want to be here long. I'm going to cut it short. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify or Google Podcasts or your favorite platform that I just did mention, please leave a 5-star review. Thanks for tuning in tonight to Prospect Avenue. I'm Kris Baker, and we'll see you next time.